Welcome to Solve Crimes with Rick and Gavin. I'm Gavin Fish. This is my partner, Rick Tracewell. Rick, how you doing?
Hey, I'm not doing too bad.
Dude,
What do we got? What do we got
today
here today?
we're leaving the United States for an amazing story that you happened upon. And as we've kind of dug into it, it's been, this is a crazy case, isn't it, Rick?
It is. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, I remember when I first told you, you're like, well, all right. And I go, just listen to the details of this thing. It's pretty nutty. It did start in Australia, Sydney, Australia, and it's slowly creeping around the world because it's a pretty fascinating, deep story and very intriguing. There are a lot of room for speculation, which people love to do, as you know.
Of course. Yeah.
And the one thing there's no doubt about, there is a crime. So it doesn't go too far off of our channel's focus. There is a crime here, and we actually are. Even though this is not our story, it is something that if anybody knows anything, if you're watching, we do have a couple of subscribers from Australia. So if they're watching,
yeah. So give us your comments. We'd love to hear about it. So the story of the Bernie Madoff of Sydney, Australia, Melissa Caddick, is coming up in just a minute. Are we live back? Sorry about that, guys. My computer kind of glitched. Sorry about that. Okay, so we're back, and we want to introduce to you the latest member of the Solve Crimes team, Dr. Kenny Clark. Kenny, welcome to Solve Crimes.
Hey guys, how's it going?
Good. So,
Pleasure to be here.
Just to give you a little bit of an introduction, and I totally closed the tab that had my bio on you, but Kenny is a quadruple certified forensic pathologist. He has taught pathology in Syracuse, New York. He has served as a medical examiner in Onondaga County and in Allegheny County, so in the states of New York and Pennsylvania. He also holds a degree in electrical engineering from Purdue University. And I did that from memory, Kenny. How did I do?
wow.
Oh, that nice.
So the reason that we brought on Kenny in today's episode is that we've got a pathology question or an anatomy question. But before we get into
if you really want to go deeper, we have not only a pathology question, but we have a pathological suspect.
So it's a pathological pathology question.
It is.
All right.
So Rick, why don't you tell us a little bit about the story?
Okay, so apparently in 2018, Melissa Caddick out of Australia had apparently opened up an investment firm where she was taking people's money and investing it for them and to earn a profit. She did invest those people's money and she did earn a profit, but she did it all in her name. So according to what I've picked up and what is reported, within a year, she took 60 investors, took their money, and I believe it was over 20 million Australian dollars, which is what right now the US dollar is about 77 cents to the Australian dollar. So it's, I'm not going to do the math, and neither is Gavin.
20 million. So about 16 million US, a little bit less than 16 million US.
Right. So she took all that money and used it on a very lavish lifestyle, $6 million home, right off of the Sydney Harbor. There she is right there. And I believe she's in her mid to late 40s, I believe. So Melissa used the money to create this lavish, wealthy lifestyle, and then used that image to prove to future investors that she knew what she was doing. She was very successful. So give me your money. I'll help you have this same kind of a lifestyle is basically what happened. So, but people caught on. In fact, I found out this morning that it wasn't any of those investors that ratted her out to the authorities. It was actually the smarter of all the investors, someone who was going to invest in her, but decided to do their research first, go figure, before giving her millions. And they thought something was fishy, so they turned her into the authorities. So in November, I believe it was November 11th or 12th, that they basically raided her home looking for evidence. They had a warrant. And the next day, she disappears.
Okay, so she disappeared by like going on a run, right? Now, one of the things that I heard, Rick, was that they took the cameras and the video equipment from her surveillance stuff away, and so there's no evidence of her leaving. They just
that the whole thing about her on a run, that's speculation. Her son says at 5:30 a.m. he heard the front door shut and assumed that she was going on a run, but so I guess technically she was going on the run for sure. Whether it was down the street or around the world is what we're trying to figure out here. But so she did leave, but we don't know if it was on her own volition or if she was taken. I mean, there were some very angry people, right?
Oh, right. And then, like, just to cut to the quick of it, eventually police announced that they found her body, but it wasn't really her body, right?
No. They found a running shoe, and inside the running shoe was a human foot, and and I guess DNA test results determined that it was Melissa Caddick's foot, but that's it. That's all they found.
Okay.
So that's where a lot of this speculation starts, right?
And that's what brings us to Dr. Clark here, right?
That's right.
So, Kenny, my question for you is like, okay, so a shoe washes ashore. A shoe washes ashore, and it has a human foot in it that turns out to be Melissa Caddick's. Now, my question first off was, did she cut off her own foot, or did she encounter some sea creature that gnawed it off? What would it look like? Would there be a difference? Would you be able to tell how that foot was removed from Melissa Caddick?
Yeah, that's an important question. And I can tell you that, a couple of things. To answer your first question, could she have cut it off? Every now and again in the world of forensic pathology, you see people go to extreme lengths to cause bodily injury to themselves. It doesn't happen often, but I can tell you that I have seen a couple of cases that involve chainsaws, that involve one gentleman involved a circular saw, a handheld skill saw that he took to his own head and neck. Now these are obviously exceptions to what we ordinarily see, but what it does show is I'm convinced that if people are determined, if the motivation is strong enough, they are capable of doing extreme.
Well, she had over 20 million reasons, right?
Well, I was going to say, I started asking myself the question: if I had to choose between my foot and 20 million in the bank.
Well, and we should also point out one of the things we missed before we start asking Kenny about the foot was that all the money is gone. She drained her accounts. So in case people were thinking she met with foul play, I lean toward the opposite because the accounts were drained.
Yeah.
So you do see from time to time somebody who will cause severe bodily injury they've got some incentive that is driving them to do that. I was thinking about the climber who got his hand caught, right? Who cut off his own hand in order to get out. Those sorts of things do happen. They do happen. We have it in us as human beings to do something like that.
We can actually, I'm convinced of it. I mean, we're all capable of doing something extreme if the motivation is potent enough. Now, I will say that in my line of work, usually these injuries, obviously, if it's my line of work, these injuries are always fatal. The motivation for the cases that I've seen, the few cases that I've seen, have been suicide, self-hatred, or underlying addiction and psychiatric disorders that are poorly controlled or uncontrolled. So there's,
Kenny, you are a medical doctor. So I guess the burning question is, the police seem to be putting out this message that there's no way she could have survived this. She's dead. What are your thoughts on that? I mean, people can cut their own foot off and survive, or no?
Sure, of course. They can. I will say, though, that to do it, there are a couple of things, Gavin, getting back to Gavin's original question, and then I'll follow up with that, Rick. Can you tell the difference between, someone who's cut foot off or someone else it's been surgically removed versus traumatically? Yes, is the answer to that. One of the benefits of training as a general pathologist before I go into the world of forensic pathology is we see surgical amputations all the time. Not all the time, but enough. And those are always done with very sharp instruments, as you can imagine. When you go through bone, there's special instruments, bone saws that they use to cut the bones, flush and square. These aren't saws you pick up at Home Depot. These are.
I guess it's too late for a disclaimer about this being graphic.
Yeah, no.
But
the bottom line
there's
is
going to be graphic content coming up. Yeah. All right.
There's a little graphic content. But the bottom line is, if something's been removed surgically, a limb's been removed surgically, you can see that clearly.
But what about if somebody were to, with a sharp knife, do that to themselves? Like in the case of that climber who had to cut through his own bone. Well, he had to separate joints, right?
Right.
I mean, I guess I'm sure that would make a mess, but would that look different than a shark cut off my foot and spit it up in the ocean?
It's hard to say because I haven't seen either one, but I'm pretty convinced that yes, it would make a difference. Traumatic amputations, which you're talking about, whether it's a shark biting it off, what we commonly see in the world of forensics is someone gets hit by a car and it breaks their foot off, almost completely tears it off. In cases like that, you're going to see extreme irregularity to the edges of the wound. It's not an incised wound like with a sharp scalpel or something like that. You're talking about blunt force impact causing stretching and tearing of soft tissues and bones. The bone margins will be very irregular. You can spot, you could just look at a traumatically avulsed wound and know that something happened like that. It's hard to confuse a wound, a limb that's been amputated surgically from a limb that's been amputated by trauma. It's very hard to confuse the two unless you're dealing with a really poor surgeon. But even the instrument itself, you're talking in something that's been removed surgically, you're talking about very clean margins, very clean incisions. And if you're using a circular saw or a chainsaw or something like that, there's going to be a lot of soft tissue tearing. And ultimately, the thing about cutting your own foot off, the only thing about this case that makes me question it is to go through the bone. That's going to be, you're going to need some kind of a saw to do that. You can't cut through that with a scalpel. So you're talking about someone with multiple instruments sitting down and doing it to themselves over a period of time. I'm not saying it can be done, but I think a more likely scenario would have someone do it for them.
So
she was very diabolical. This was not something, my opinion is that this was something that she had planned, and she had plenty of cash to hire someone, unethical or underground or whatever you want to call them, to do such a thing. Because the questions, and I'm not the only one. As you can imagine, we've seen interviews with some of the people who she had, taken money from and ripped them off, and they don't believe she's dead because they've seen what she's capable of, and the fact that the money's been drained. There's a shoe. So my theory that I gave Gavin and Kenny before was that the authorities are saying that she's still alive. They blurred the image so that no one can see. They haven't really given much detail on the condition, of and how they believe, the foot was removed. Because like Kenny said, it's probably pretty obvious if you're in that field. my theory is that they're claiming that she's dead, and they're putting all that information out there and denying that she's still alive. And I think they're doing that to give Melissa Caddick the thinking that she's going to somehow not believing that she's being chased anymore. She's going to let her guard down, and they're going to catch her. Yeah. The rest of her.
Rick, I think that you have proven to my satisfaction anyway over time that your mind goes to the deepest, darkest way possible. I don't know. I mean, if I go back and we look at that shoe, Kenny, to me, of course, they blurred it out so that we can't see it, right? But to me, if it were cut or if it were removed, then I don't think they would have to cut through a bone at that point. They would just have to cut through a joint, right? Disjoint?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I can't see the actual picture, so I don't know. I mean, that would be the option, is not through the bone, but actually through the joint where the bones connect to one another. You can cut through tendons with essentially a sharp knife. Again, I mean, you're talking about an extreme lengthy process. I don't, it's not, the injuries that I have seen, the chainsaw injuries and the circular saw injuries, those were rather quick. You take a circular saw to your neck, you're talking about a 3-second active injury and then some hemorrhage.
Right.
This would be a little bit of time. This would be painful. This would be, aside from just putting it in a shear and shearing it off, which I'm sure wasn't the case, this would take some time, and it would take an incredible amount of internal fortitude for someone to do it.
Now, Mariah said they kept calling it severed. So I think your point, Mariah, being that had a shark taken it off, they may have called it bitten or something like that, right? So,
well, I mean, technically severed is both, right? But I get the point.
Yeah.
Yeah, from my perspective, severed just means it's off.
Right, it's removed. Yeah, yeah, and not to mention, I mean, it's I don't see a lot of blood on that shoe. If it was a shark bite, I would assume there would be blood on there. I mean, but it was in the water, so I'm not an expert there. Yeah. Also, a lot of shoreline. That's the only body part that's been found. This lady was very, I keep using the word diabolical, mainly because it wasn't like by accident that she is in the position that she's in with the authorities, right? So it took a lot of, internal fortitude, I guess, to pull off what she did, and leave her husband and son high and dry financially. I mean, everything was in her name, all of the assets, from what I understand, and his personal bank account had $1.95 in it left.
Wow.
So left him high and dry. He's about to get evicted out of the house. So he and their 15-year-old son, I think it's his son. I haven't really figured that out, but it's one way or another, it's her son. But so her husband and her 15-year-old son are going to be high and dry. So she's diabolical. This doesn't, I wouldn't put it past her to have already secured a prosthetic foot.
I don't know.
Plan the whole thing out.
I don't know. Kenny,
she
we
felt
appreciate
the heat for a long time. It wasn't just on November 11th, right?
Yeah, yeah.
She knew it was coming down on her.
Sorry, we got a lag here. Kenny, thanks for joining us today and offering that perspective from the medical side of things. We really appreciate it.
Yes, and we will have Kenny back on for other episodes. He's an amazing asset to the channel. So we'll be and if anybody has any questions for Kenny, because we may not have covered everything, by all means, comment, and we'll get those to him.
Yeah, Kenny, you'll probably stick around, right? We might bring you back if
I'm gonna stick around.
Somebody has a question for you. Good, thanks, buddy.
All right, thanks, guys.
So there you have it, Rick. Kenny Clark is an amazing addition to our team. I want to go back a little bit because I'm sure there are tons of people here that don't really know the story, and I kind of jumped the gun and didn't let you really tell the whole story. So what
have I missed?
Well, I don't know. You've got a whole bunch here. Okay, so Melissa Caddick, she convinced friends, family, her parents.
She took over $1 million from her parents, telling them that she was going to invest in real estate for them. And apparently they're aging. That's how the description I got. And that they weren't completely loaded. Like that was, from what I understand, was kind of like all the money they had in the world. And she disappeared with it. I mean, she lied to them. She did not purchase property in their name at all.
Okay. So not only is she willing to defraud like perfect strangers and rich people out of money, she's willing to do it to her folks, to her own parents.
Yeah.
And then she's got a 15-year-old son, and she's married. Here's a picture of Melissa Caddick with her husband. What's his name again?
Anthony.
So
Anthony Coletti.
Anthony Coletti. Thank you very much. So that's Melissa and Anthony Coletti. Does it appear, Rick, to you that the husband and son knew anything about this?
Honestly, in other scenarios, hearing a story like this, I would say it's impossible for them not to know. But I really have my own theory, and I'm not the only one. I've read a lot of other ones too. I think he was, kept in the dark. She was in charge of everything. All the assets were in her name. He does seem like an innocent. I mean, he's also sticking around. You notice he's the one that's, holding the empty bag, as it were. So I don't think he had anything to do with it. I have my own theories about, and again, this may just be the cynical part of me, but I'm not the only one. I think he was kind of, you've seen the classic, in the past, the trophy wife thing. I have a feeling that she used him. Like she married him for the image of a solid family person rather than a single woman begging for money kind of a thing. I think she used him as she was portraying an image that she wanted to portray to investors. I think it was all planned from the beginning.
Okay, so Anthony Coletti is a hairdresser and DJ. One of the sketchy things here, Rick, is that he waited 30 hours to report her missing.
Yeah, I know. And it's hard to put yourself in his position as far as with everything going on, you can't exactly expect him to be thinking straight. And it certainly could be that she told him something or gave him some indication. He could have been really mad at her and, locked himself in the bedroom. We just don't know all the details. I mean, that is a sketchy thing for sure, but under the circumstances, who knows, he's got his own reasons, I'm sure, but
and he has said that he believed that she was set up. Like he believed she was innocent.
Right. Which is why I say, and I've seen interviews with his father as well. And by the way, his father is a justice of the peace. That's how they described him. I'm not sure legally what that is in Australia, but there some documents have surfaced in the investigation that Mellissa used her father-in-law's. She forged his signature on documents that she used fraudulently with clients. I don't know if they were documents that showed that she had invested when she didn't. I don't know what the details are on that, but she forged his signature, in order to get away with everything. So,
wow.
There's just, like I said, it's very diabolical. This is not like she robbed a bank and disappeared. This is something that she's been planning for years.
I actually saw something. I found an article in the Daily Mail that said that Melissa Caddick was caught forging checks 20 years ago. When I read the story, I came in here, she was 29 years old. She was hired by a fund manager for a clerical job, and then they found that there were some abnormalities in the accounts, and they looked, and there were two checks, one at $5,000, one for $10,000, that were forged signatures, and Caddick admitted that she was the one who did that, and the fund manager decided to just let it go, right? They fired her and they let her go. And that's actually one of those things where, you don't want your business to suffer because you've got a bad employee that's doing fraudulent things. You don't want you don't want your clients to think that there's rampant fraud going on. So I can
And who knows what
understand
she
why they do
said.
that.
She may have pulled on some heartstrings and said it was, the money was for, her, whatever, her mom needed surgery to live. I mean,
Right.
we don't know, and businesses don't want to get caught up in giant, long legal battles either.
Yeah.
It would have cost them a lot of money, so it's, yeah. So, well, and I can only imagine that she learned from that and figured out how to do it, and not get caught right away, I guess.
Well, yeah. And it shows a pattern of, I don't know what the difference is between a sociopath and a psychopath, right? But it shows some type of ability to understand how people respond to the way that you are.
Yeah. Well, I think when all this is said and done, there's going to be a lot of psychology, because if she cut her own foot off to disappear, and I mean, that's definitely a psychopath. She and I think those go hand in hand. Psychopaths and sociopaths. I mean, they're very similar. They don't really have the empathy for people and their feelings and what they're doing to them. It's all about them. Psychopaths take it to another level, and I think that she falls under that category from the layman angle that I have.
So I'm curious what people think, because there's basically a few different there are a few different scenarios that could have happened, right? Number one is she went off on a run and she accidentally fell off the cliffs into the ocean. She dies, right? Number two is she committed suicide. Maybe she went to those cliffs and she threw herself into the ocean. Number three is the one that we've been talking about, which is a staged death. And number four being more foul play, right? Investors get pissed off, right?
Right.
So,
right.
Hey, we've got a question from Tiffany here. How could someone survive cutting off their own, she actually says, foot later? Let's bring back Kenny, and let's ask Kenny that question. Kenny, can a person survive? Let me unmute you here. Sorry, buddy. Can a person survive cutting off their own foot? How would they survive that?
That's actually a really good question. It would be difficult, let me say that, without help. And here's why. If someone has a foot, any limb, surgically amputated, what they do is they take out the part of the limb, they take off the part of the limb, rather, that needs to come off. And they always leave extra soft tissue and skin left over. And the reason they do that is so they have something to seal up, if you will, the actual open wound. You can imagine if you have an arm or a leg or something like this, and you cut it off flush, how do you actually close that wound? There's an actual way to do it, and surgeons are trained to do that. Without knowing that, it would be difficult to close the wound. So that's one thing. But assuming that, let's just assume, for instance, that she actually did manage to get the foot off herself. The issue would be blood loss. That would be an issue. And the greater issue, I think, even if you can control the blood loss, because your body actually has a way of adjusting itself very quickly. One of the mechanisms your body does that, especially talking about amputations or severing blood vessels, is vasoconstriction. It will actually cause the blood vessels to narrow down to minimize blood loss so you can control it. That's not always adequate. But what concerns me more than that is the infection that would set in. I mean, when you have a gaping open wound like that, it's just wide open for no matter how, shy of doing it sterilely in a surgical OR, you're just inviting thousands of different types of microbes to get in and set up an infection. And that could be lethal. Really, not just discomforting or problematic. It could actually be lethal. So
the odds are, if she did this to herself, she probably had somebody who knew what they were doing.
That's what I would say. If she did it to herself, it would be it's difficult for me to imagine that she would be able to close it properly, be able to control the blood flow properly, hemorrhage, and certainly post-operative infection. I'm not saying it couldn't be done. I'm just saying that it would be difficult to imagine.
So Rick, her home was raided on November 11th. She went missing on November 12th, right? Did
Right.
she have any indication prior to that home raid that it was going to happen? I mean, was she under investigation? Would she have had time to set something like that up?
From what I understand, she was under investigation. Well, again, even if that didn't happen, that she's been getting phone calls from investors. She knows it's coming down the pike, right? She knows it's coming to a head at some point. That's why I'm saying I don't get the impression that she was stupid enough to not think that she was going to have to, explain herself at some point, right? You can't just keep taking people's money for years and years and years. I mean, she got away with it longer than a lot of people would have, I think, because I think she had some kind of answers for her investors, which again, a lot of them were relatives and friends. These weren't people that she was angry at. She was just didn't think of them at all. She just saw them as a means to an end to get what she wanted. So yeah, I think she had plenty of time to plan this thing. Plenty of time.
Now, I mean, if we
plenty of cash. She drained the accounts.
If we go full on like movie mode, where I'm trying to think of the director, but let's say that this is a Tarantino movie, right? Okay, so let's imagine that the investors figured it out, or couple investors figure it out. They could have done something like this if they had the means, right? They could fake her death for the purpose of getting the money out of her.
Mm-hmm. Could be, but she, again, the accounts were drained prior to that day, right? If they were drained the next day, a whole different story, obviously. So
when were the accounts drained?
It was over a period of time, from what I understand, and it was so between 2018 and November 2020 is when the accounts were drained. I don't think they're releasing a lot of details for obvious reasons. I mean, it's because like Kenny said, I mean, even before we talked to Kenny, my thoughts were, the police are holding out information, as far as the condition of the foot, because they could tell, come on, they'd be able to tell if it was done surgically, even if it was meant to look like it wasn't, they could tell if it was. And so I think they're doling out information as necessary. And I think they're holding back a lot of information. So I think we haven't heard the whole story, that's for sure. But it's certainly, I mean, there's certainly a lot of different angles that we could look at this. And if you look at it from a movie angle, which, you and I are both kind of movie buffs with this kind of stuff, it's, I could think of all kinds of dramatic ways that this could go. And we're not, we may be laughing about some of this stuff, but we want to make sure everybody knows we're not laughing at the crime. It's a serious crime. And we're not laughing at, the fact that a foot washed ashore. It's I just don't believe that she met a tragic end. I just don't buy that. From everything that I know.
Not in your mind. It couldn't have happened.
I'm not saying it couldn't. Just don't buy it. I think that she was, again, I use that word diabolical only because she was very, she knew exactly what she was doing. This wasn't some surprise that, I'm being raided. She knew it was going to happen. So at some point, I think that she had planned her escape. And like I said, my thoughts on her husband, I think she didn't take him with her. She planned this.
Yeah.
Left him high and dry.
Kenny, I know that you're familiar with this case, and so far we've just been asking you questions, medical questions, but what's your opinion? Is this something that you think that she did to herself, or do you think no foul play involved?
Well, let me first start by addressing a point that you brought up about 5 minutes ago, Gavin, the difference between a sociopath and a psychopath. I am not a psychiatrist nor a psychologist. In fact, those subjects bore me, to be honest. But that said, I think I have a working knowledge of what the difference is, and it's relevant to this case. A sociopath, both of them have, a sociopath, let me say this, may have a conscience, but is not led by their conscience. They do what they want. They don't care about the consequences to others. They're very often, if they're caught in something, if something does happen or go awry, they blame it on other people. The conscience is there, from what I understand, but they're just not led by it.
Right.
A psychopath, is what they would do, for lack of a better way of saying it, cold-hearted. They're extremely calculating. They're extremely methodical. Everything they do is planned. Everything they do, they may be very well aware that what they're doing is wrong. It may hurt people, and they simply don't care. So it's not an impulsivity issue. They don't have heart.
And it's not that they aren't led by their self-consciousness. They just don't have one.
They just don't seem to have one, right? Exactly. That's my understanding. Again, I'm not a psychiatrist or a psychologist, but I know a little about it. That said, everything I know about the details of this case, from what you both have told me, she seems like a very calculating person. I mean, you're talking about leaving your 15-year-old son. Forget about the husband, but what about your child? To leave your child with in the bank account and just walk away. If that's what happened, that's and it sounds like it is. That's a whole different. That to me extends beyond sociopathy.
When we contacted you, Kenny, you had said that you actually were familiar with this case. How did you come across it?
Oh, just browsing around. I still, I'm always looking up forensic stuff on seeing what's in the news, seeing some of my colleagues around the nation, what they're doing. And I just happened on this case.
Hey, we've got another medical question from Tiffany, our mutual friend. She said, I saw a theory that the ankle is the weakest part of a decomposing body and could have detached naturally. Is that possible?
I mean, it's possible, but in this case, no. I haven't seen the picture, but if there was in order to get any kind of dismemberment, you might say, disarticulation of joints, an ankle from a leg or a hand from an arm, you're talking about significant amounts of decomposition, advanced decomposition. Whether or not the ankles,
as well, right?
That would go to the foot as well, right? But you're talking about the level of decomposition is grotesque at this point. It's not something that it's something that surely would have been mentioned. And you're talking about, in many cases, depending on the climate and the humidity and things like the temperature, things like that, it could be weeks and weeks, if not months, before hands start falling off or feet start falling off. So just considering the timeline here and considering that there was no mention made of, a partially decomposed foot inside a shoe, I doubt that is the case here. But definitely we see people essentially fall apart when they decompose to such a degree, but that's advanced decomposition. And I don't get the sense anyway that that's what we're talking about.
Yeah, I just think, again, her being methodical and probably a psychopath. I mean, she probably knows full well that Australian oceans are very shark infested. So she had an excuse built in as to why the rest of her body didn't get up on shore, that kind of a thing. I think she really thought it was through.
Right.
That's really interesting. Now, let's see, the foot washed ashore in February, isn't that correct, Rick?
Right.
So
right. She entered the waters in November.
Considering being in an ocean and in and around Sydney, man, it's not like I'm a maritime scholar or anything like that, but
it was summertime, by the way.
It's summertime,
here,
so
summer
it would be slightly warmer water temperature. I mean, taking that into consideration, is it possible in the water? Actually, let me ask you a specific question. Does the body decompose faster in the air or in the water?
Oh, generally speaking, to be honest, there's so many factors that are involved in decomposition. It really depends on the temperature, depends on the humidity, it depends on the underlying body temperature at the time of death, it depends on how much body fat is around the body, it depends on if there's an underlying medical condition that might, in other words, if someone dies with a fever of 106 versus someone dies hypothermic, there's going to be radical differences in the rate at which they decompose. Every case is truly different. We have general rules of thumb. Water's colder, than ambient temperature with sunlight radiating down on you, and and there's not the microbial. A lot of decomposition is caused by bacteria, actually. Once your body dies and your immune system breaks down, bacteria is you have bacteria in your colon, in your gut, that kind of swim around, you might say. They move. They get into the bloodstream and they start circulating. Bacteria on the skin will start to get in and they produce gas. And, it's a multi-step process that depends on, so it's interesting. That's why it's so difficult to determine the cause of the time of death of a body. Think about it. We have robots on Mars right now, but when it comes to determining what time someone died after the fact, we still have no good way of doing it, because things like decomposition, body rigidity or rigor mortis, all the things we use, there's so many factors involved in determining what actually, there's so many factors that come into play after someone's dead. And so many of them are predictable, and so many of those factors are determined by other factors that it's almost impossible to say. That's a long-winded answer to your question, but the bottom line is, when it comes to decomposition, generally speaking, you throw someone in a cold body of water, they're going to decompose slowly.
Got it.
Okay.
Yeah.
We definitely have to put a little warning after this thing is finished. Make sure you have not eaten lunch before you.
Sorry, got you.
No. That's exactly why we have you on here. I was just sitting there listening to you, and I'm going, boy, I may not have lunch today.
Well, one of the reasons that I really love that you've joined our team, Kenny, is that we have questions like this all the time on the cases that we're working on. Right. Let's see, if you're new to our channel, there's a case that we kind of brought Kenny in on. It's the Amanda Winkowski case in Buffalo, New York. And having a forensic pathologist to read the autopsies and to read the toxicology reports and interpretations from other doctors and so forth has been super valuable. And we're looking forward to using Kenny on some future videos, specifically in the Amanda Winkowski case. But from here on out, we're really glad to have a forensic pathologist on the team. So thanks for joining us,
Absolutely.
Kenny.
Yep. Thanks, guys.
Well, Rick.
Yeah.
That is the story of Melissa
This is not
Caddick.
the end of this story for sure, regardless of if we're right or wrong, right?
I have to express to you, Rick, like a fraternal disappointment that there haven't been enough puns. We had you had 10 of them leading up to the broadcast, and as soon as we went live,
I did. Well, I'm trying to be sensitive to the fact that we are talking about a human being. Yes, we're going to have those kind of comments, so, and she does have a son, who's 15, so I'm trying to be sensitive to that. My natural instincts, as you know, off camera were I had more puns than we'd have time on this stream. So
yeah, you did. But the real victims in this story, I mean, I'm sorry if Melissa Caddick lost her life. I don't want anybody to lose their life over anything. I'm very sorry about that. But the real victims are all of the investors that were defrauded, her son, her husband, the people around her. Her husband's there left holding the bag. It looks like the house is going to be liquidated to pay off investors. Yeah. It's
Absolutely.
a $6 million house. So, $4.8 million US. And
I do want to point something out, by the way, that I missed earlier, just to show her level of, I guess, psychopathy, really. Okay. One of the things, what she loved to do was brag to people that she was very well off and that what she was doing was successful, that she had, invest in me, look how well I'm doing, you can do the same. And she loved to brag about these lavish trips they would make. Apparently, they would go to Aspen, Colorado, here in the U.S. on vacations, and she bragged that she purchased this fancy home in Aspen, and that they would go visit it, on these holidays, and spend a lot of money. And even her husband believed that she had purchased this property. She left this Aspen, Colorado property to a family member in her will.
Okay.
But she never owned it. It was a rental. So that gives me a lot of insight on this woman, so, and it's not an excuse. I mean, if she's had a break with reality, that it's not my problem or anybody else's problem. It's not an excuse, but the explanation it might be there, or a little bit of an explanation on just how far she was gone mentally to do all this stuff.
That
I don't
is
think it's beyond her
weaknesses.
to have her foot cut off. That's my point.
That is one of the weaknesses of us as humans, is if we're told something long enough, we tend to start believing it. And specifically, sometimes we can tell ourselves something. And over time, you tell yourself that same lie over and over again. Before you know it, you don't even know that it's a lie yourself.
Well, and and I believe that as the pressure builds, let's say people are breathing down her neck, the authorities, her investors, she knows that something's going to give, right? Something's going to happen. She knows it. She's not stupid. So I think that pressure, it furthers the break with reality, I think.
Yeah. Well, hey, everybody in the U.S., if you haven't heard about it, that is now the story of Melissa Caddick.
Now on your radar.
Yes.
And we will absolutely break in. We thought we had some news. Gavin had heard that, her belly button washed ashore.
There was like human flesh with a navel attached that also washed ashore, and
I had jokes about that too.
Yeah.
And I kept those to myself, even with you. I'm definitely keeping them to myself here.
Good job.
But it turned out it wasn't hers. Yeah. But there's going to be a lot more. And as soon as we have anything significant, we'll come back.
That makes me wonder, though, how often is our human parts like washing up ashore in Australia?
It's Australia, man. I know that there's some crazy stuff that goes on.
It's an entire continent.
Australia is like
yeah.
Florida.
Yeah. Australia is the Florida of the other continents.
The world.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah. We love you, Australia. Yes. Thank you very much for being you.
Oh, yeah. They're definitely unique. So, those of you who are watching, certainly subscribe so that when we come up with something new, and hit that little bell too, because when we do something live, we'll try to give you guys as much notice as possible if you want to, hear more. Also, we'll have Kenny back, depending on how this thing ends up. But we're at the edge of our seats waiting to see how this thing gets resolved. And there's no doubt the story is not over with. So we'll be following up on it as soon as there's something significant.
All right. See you next time, Rick.
Thanks.